Namaskar, Nilesh Oak. In this episode, we are going to briefly discuss two elements out of total of 16 elements of Nyaya Darshan. Nyaya Darshan describes 16 different elements and states that one has to develop expertise, a mastery in these 16 elements if one wants to learn how to think properly, how to think in a scientific fashion, how to build scientific acumen, how to think logically, but also how to draw the inferences from the available information logically, and also how to imagine thought experiments in trying to understand a certain evidence, in trying to decide how to validate certain evidence. So think of imagining these thought experiments, but then also taking the next step using Tantra Yukti to turn those thought experiments into practical lab experiments. For lack of better word, I would say lab experiments, like something physically, empirically that we can do and able to validate what we have found in a repeatable and reproducible fashion. Repeatable means if I do this again, I should able to get the same outcome, same result. If somebody else does it, that person should able to get the same outcome. That will be reproducibility. Now, the reproducibility is not necessarily limited to individuals, as in like me doing the same thing 3 times and another individual doing the same thing three times. But what about if we change the instrument? If we use different say techniques for dating as in like say carbon dating and thermoluminescence dating and some other type of technique, do those different techniques, assuming we have the correct evidence, we have the available evidence for appropriate for those techniques and instruments, do we get the same results or do we get similar results? Do we get identical results? Do we get same results? So it's related to a different technique. What about if it's say astronomy? If we use different astronomy software, simulation software, do we get the same result? And if we don't get it, either between two astronomy simulation software, between say two different techniques for dating like carbon dating and thermoluminescence, then again we have to learn how to analyze that information and understand why they are giving different results. So all kinds of applications. Now again, I am going to use my favorite area, my favorite subject, my favorite area of research, that is dating of Mahabharata and Ramayana, in this case only Mahabharata, but I am using it for a important reason. Many times people ask me, so you figured out the date of Mahabharata and figured out the date of Ramayana and Rigveda and Sushruta and Bhagavad Puran. Great. Now, what do we have use for that information other than fixing our history? Yeah, that's great. But what is its use for, say, today's problems? And by that, they don't mean just the intellectual problems like the education and the way the incorrect history that we have been taught, but our practical problems like what Rigveda would go and do it themselves, the Rigvedic rishis, and also would pray to Rigvedic deities like say Indra. Om Tvanno Asya Amate Rutakshudo Abhishaste Ravasprudi Tvanna Uti Tava Chitraya Dhiya Shiksha Shachishta Gatuvita. So, Om Tvanno Asya Amate Rutak Kshudo Abhishastu Ravasprudi. So, Amati Kshuda Abhishastu. Amati is like, the issue with the mind, the bad thoughts, how to avoid those. Even intellectual, mind and buddhi, mana and buddhi. Kshuda, that's a hunger. Okay, now the hunger of a stomach, but hunger of different things, the shelter and the clothing and prosperity and so on. And abhishastu, which literally means curse, but a good health. So that is going on from the Rigvedic times, and the great rishis came up with different skills to actually meet these needs. So unless we have a benefit or a use of our ancient text to solve our today's problems, people may not feel enough attraction to read them, to know more from them, and that's why I'm using the Mahabharata as an example. But actually, this is a good illustration of the methodologies that are used to decipher this text, or the kind of evidence that very creatively, in a very ingenious fashion, that the likes of Valmiki and Vyasa embedded in this text. This is not a coincidence, guys. Okay, this is a civilization. This is a dharma civilization with a very deep antiquity, and it has sustained for this long because of ingenious people like Valmiki and Vyasa. They were not just kavi in the ordinary sense of what we call poet today. Okay, they were visionaries. Anyways, with that preamble, let me get into the technical nitty-gritty things here. So we are going to talk about 2 elements out of the 16 elements that Nyaya Darshan refers to. Now, what are the 16 elements? It starts with a pramana, and I'm just going to leave this at the Sanskrit level for today. Pramana, Prameya, Prayojana, Samshaya, Drishtanta. These are 5. Then Siddhanta, Avayava, Tarka, Nirnaya, Vada. These are the additional 5s. Now these are in a directional, in a simplistic sense, I'm going to say these are the good ones that you must grasp and always make use of. But then there are 6 additional ones. Remember, I said total of 16. So those have a negative connotation. That doesn't mean you should not learn about them. In fact, you should learn them even more, because you want to learn them so that you don't make use of those things which are undesired, that makes you unscientific, illogical, idiotic, and so on, which many of my trolls jump into at a drop of a hat. What are those? Jalpa, Vitanda, Hetvabhasa, Chala, Jati. These are the 5. And the last one is Nigrahasthana. There are many of these things, including these 5 things that one may do. And also there are some additional things that one may do and bring oneself in trouble. And our system was so strict that there would be these experts in Nyaya. They would be sitting there and listening, and also the people in the audience who are experts in Nyaya. And then immediately they would stop the person who is arguing and say, hold on, this is a fallacy. This is a futile objection that you are raising. This is a futile comment, and so on. This is unnecessary digression, or this is Vitanda, because you are telling somebody that whatever he or she is asserting, claiming is wrong, but you don't have a correct answer. You don't have your own position. Forget correct answer. You don't have a comparable position of your own. You are doing Vitanda. You are not welcome here. And unfortunately, we have lost that tradition. Even many of the Nyaya Darshana expert that I come across, with a very few exceptions, unfortunately, though some of these folks are extremely old, I don't see any Nyaya experts. Now, there are Sanskrit experts who actually know Nyaya Darshana by heart. But, that's like somebody knowing the formulas of modern science by heart, but really don't know how to make use of them. Out of these 16, we are going to look at Prameya and a Siddhanta. Okay, in English that would be hypothesis and theory. All right, with that, let's jump into the screen itself. All right, so that's our hypothesis and a theory, or in Sanskrit and in the language of Nyaya Darshan, Prameya and Siddhanta. 2 of the 16 elements of Nyaya Darshan. A very high level comparison between the two, I would encourage all of you. There is a tons of information on the internet. Okay, if you just type the word what is hypothesis, what is a theory, hypothesis versus theory, difference between hypothesis and theory, similarity between hypothesis and theory, you're going to get tons of information. So my intention here is not to bombard you with too much information, but just give you some clear, crisp foundation. Also keep in mind, whereas we are comparing these two, in reality there is a lot of similarity. Okay, and we'll talk about this. But for now, just focus on some of the crisp and subtle and sometimes not so subtle distinct differences between the two. Okay, so in terms of a meaning, let's look at hypothesis. It is an educated guess. You might have heard me say this many times in my lectures, in my conversations, in my question answer sessions. It is an educated guess based on certain data, certain evidence. Okay, this is as an inception for further research or investigation, and that's what is called hypothesis. Okay, it's a good education guess that we want to test and see if we are right. What is a theory? Theory is a well substantiated explanation of natural phenomenon which is continuously validated through experimentation and observation. Okay, so this has gone through multiple iterations with multiple sets of data, which has to be consistent with the overall theme, whatever that phenomenon that one is trying to study. For example, in my case, it is the Mahabharata text. Okay, or Valmiki Ramayana text. You can think of that as that natural phenomenon. Now, is that natural phenomenon? No, but it's a one cohesive text. So therefore, I will not mix it with something else. Now, hypothesis is based on limited data. In fact, there is some data or there is some evidence that one is trying to make sense of and one is struggling. And that's where hypothesis is born. So one may very creatively propose another explanation, an educated guess, and see if that educated guess helps us understand that evidence, understand that data. Keep this in mind. As opposed to that, when it comes to theory, we are looking at a wide range of data. Then when it comes to testing and proving, it is not scientifically tested and proven. Okay, we don't know that. We have just made a guess, and now we are going to use that to actually design thought experiments and then actually practical lab experiments to test it scientifically. If it is, we can come up with an explanation that fits the definitions of science, logic, and so on. Consistency. Okay, now on the other hand, theories, it is something scientifically tested and proven. Keep that in mind. These are descriptions in ordinary language of the day. So there are some words which a person with a very sophisticated scientific mind will object to. For example, the word proven or proof or things like that. In science, truly there is no proof. Okay, all we have is a strong corroboration with different levels, the degree of testability, degree of verifiability, degree of corroborability. See, very difficult to say the word, degree of corroboration, and so on. And then eventually, based on our past experience about the scientific game that we have learned so far, we make our mind. We individually make our mind. Many individuals make a mind, and then eventually that becomes a part of a background knowledge. In that sense, it is scientifically tested and proven. Okay, but keep in mind, either a hypothesis or theory, they both can be falsified. Okay, so it is the best fit for today, best fit based on all available choices and based on available science and technology at any given point. Now, hypothesis relies on projection or possibility, and we will understand what we mean by that. I'll take actually an example, okay? And the theory is basically relies on evidence and verification. Again, that repeatability, reproducibility. Keep this in mind. It also applies to hypothesis, okay, when you are testing it. The results of hypothesis are uncertain, which is to say, we have taken an educated guess. We don't know if we are right or wrong. Now, in case of theory, we are certain. Keep this in mind, these are relative terms. We are certain about a theory which is scientifically tested and proven with evidence and verification and repeatability and reproducibility. To that extent, we feel certain. But keep that in mind, in a truly scientific spirit, the best we can say is that so far, all the attempts to falsify the theory, this particular theory, have failed. That is not a guarantee that in future some additional evidence, some additional explanation may not come up that will falsify that theory. But when that happens, it's not a bad news at all. If that truly happens, this means we have broken another barrier in our ignorance and going further towards expansion of knowledge, and which means our knowledge is to expand. Okay, and that's how we can see this journey. Okay, now quickly the Sanskrit word. We discussed two elements, Prameya and Siddhanta. Now look at some of the nuances around that word Prameya. The reason I just mentioned that, because if I say Prameya, and it is, by the way, that is the correct definition in the context of Nyaya Darshana. Prameya means hypothesis. But somebody who are not familiar with science, somebody who are not familiar with the common sense or Viveka Buddhi, but maybe only know Sanskrit, they might just create some digressions. Okay, so just to give you an idea, Sanskrit is an extremely rich language, a nuanced language, okay, with different meanings. When you use the word, and sometimes you use the, what you can say, utpatti, the basic pratyay, or even, I'm not a Vakrana guy, I'm not a grammarian. What is the word? A certain word like a stha and ka and cha and kha and so on. They have a certain meaning. When combined with few other things, it attains a different meaning. And that is utpatti. Okay, that's the, what you can say, that's the purview of a Vakran or grammar. But then there is something called nirukta, which is to say, nirukta, the process of a nirukta, of attaching different meanings to the same word, it's a very spiritual, it's an adhyatmic process. And that happens over a very long period of time. And that's why you get these different nuances. Okay, so Prameya can be mean to be ascertain or proved. Now see how consistent it is with the definition of hypothesis that we saw. Thing to be proved or the topic to be discussed, that of which a correct notion should be formed. It has not been formed yet, we are going to test it. Object of certain knowledge, okay, that is a word that you see many times in Sanskrit literature. The Prameya, in the sense of, hey, what are you talking? And one may say, well, I'm talking about Mahabharata. Okay, what about Mahabharata? And one may say, well, the dating of Mahabharata, when exactly that historical event took place. Okay, and how are you doing this? Okay, using astronomy evidence from the Mahabharata text. And all of these things, that 3-4 things that I just discussed, they may be also called Prameya because that is an object of certain knowledge. So just keep that in the mind. Beyond a hypothesis, Prameya also takes that meaning. Prameya means measurable. Now, do you know where this comes from? Because in the sense of hypothesis, it better be measurable. It better be empirical. And we will see, if I get time, how some of the Mahabharata researchers or some of the Indic researchers, not even limited to Mahabharata, have suggested atrociously nonsensical hypotheses for some of the evidence that I had a pleasure of researching for the last 30 years. But the measurable is the key thing. You know what Galileo said? Our job is to measure things. Our job is to take the things that are measurable and measure them. And our job is to take the things that are not measurable and turn them into measurable. Okay? Turn them into empirical, turn them so that we can quantify them as much as possible, and so on. Okay? So it has a very scientific leaning, in that word. Okay, Prameya, the next one. Look at this: to be measured. Okay, Prameya means demonstrability. You should able to demonstrate, and the other people should able to verify in a repeatable and reproducible fashion. Prameya is a provableness. Again, that has to do with the empiricism. Meaning, if you make a hypothesis, it better be empirically testable and in that sense provable. Okay. The next one, topic to be discussed, same as what we saw above. Thing to be proved, we saw that already. Object of knowledge, very similar to object of certain knowledge. Provable, which is to make sure that you turn this into a empirical thing. To be ascertained or proved, and a theorem. Now keep that in mind. As I said, hypothesis and theory many times in a ordinary language, even the ordinary language of science, are used interchangeably, and that can sometimes create a confusion. Oh, but I thought you said that is a theory, or I thought you said that's a hypothesis, but here somebody is saying a theory, or even you are saying a theory. Keep that in mind. These two words, hypothesis and theorem, are used interchangeably. To that extent, Prameya and Siddhanta are also used interchangeably, but it's important to know the differences. So let's go to Siddhanta. What is a Siddhanta? It's a settled opinion or a doctrine, okay, received or admitted truth. Now, when does that happen? Because somebody else has done it and we are taking this in a Shraddha. Now, Shraddha is always blind, but why are we taking it? Because there is a framework which allows us to trust certain information. Okay, for example, in ordinary language, we go to the airport, and let's say we don't know exactly where to find a certain place. We may go to the information counter and may ask, hey, where can I find XYZ? And they will say, go to the left, go for like 5 blocks and take a left turn, and we trust that information. In that sense, a received or admitted truth. We take that as a established background knowledge. Okay, either that is used in the sense of a shabda, or that is used in the sense of agama in the Sanskrit language. The next one, particular class of Buddhist or Jaina works. Okay, yeah, true, we will just skip that, not relevant to our current discussion. That's why. Final end, or aim or purpose. Yeah, just understand the different nuances that can be attached to the same word. Established end, dogma. Okay, because somebody says this is how it is, guys. Okay, we say, oh, but have you tested it empirically? Oh, no, we are not even interested in testing it. Then it's not scientific. That doesn't mean the person has no right to hold on to that dogma. Okay, they can and they will. They're not going to listen to you, but it's not scientific. At least that much you should able to make a distinction. The next one, demonstrated conclusion of an argument. Fine. Axiom. Now this is, I don't want to spend time again, but just keep that in mind. Sometime in my future episode, or if you write in the comments, and do write what you know, just don't tell me, Nileshji, please make another episode on axiomatic theory. There is a difference on axiomatic theory, okay, or axiomatic hypothesis and so on, versus the kind of hypothesis or kind of theory that you build based on the educated guess, and then go through this empirical testing multiple times, repeatability, reproducibility, but that's beyond the subject today. Okay, then of course you can see the translation theory, rule, principle. So that rule, principle are basically what? Something well established theorems, and that's why we may call it a rule, we may call it a principle, and again possibly doctrine, and axiom is repeated. All right, let's look at another set of comparison. We'll go fast through this, but it's a slightly different information, so you will find this useful and interesting. So, definition again, a suggested explanation for an observable phenomenon or prediction of a possible causal correlation among multiple phenomena. So, a suggested explanation for an observable phenomenon. Now, this observable phenomenon could be actually a data point. Like, somebody seeing Aurora Borealis. I don't know how many of you have seen the Northern Lights, Aurora Borealis or Aurora Australis, or whatever the right word there, the Southern Lights. I was fortunate to see the Northern Lights, Aurora Borealis, um, across the northern hemisphere and in amazing different intensity. So suppose somebody looks at it and now asks the question, what are they? And then when somebody, I mean, all of us may come up with different explanations. Those are the suggested explanations. But now we have to test it, okay? And we are not going to go into right now here for aurora borealis, at least how we will test it. But take that as a homework, how you may go about testing what that phenomenon is, okay? Now, in comparison, in science, a theory is well substantiated, unifying. Remember the word unifying explanation for a set of verified proven hypothesis or for a set of verified data set of evidence. The hypothesis is based on a suggestion, a possibility, projection or prediction, but the result is uncertain. We already saw that. On the other hand, theory is based on evidence, multiple pieces of evidence, verification, and repeated testing. We talked about repeatability, reproducibility. But to that, I can add many things, just like we talked about different equipment, different methods of testing, different astronomy software, and so on. Okay. Similarly, we may want to test a certain theory over a different range. We will call that linearity. If we want to add the element of time, like something that is true today, is it also true 6 months from now when we do the same experiment? Okay, that has the elements of stability. So even across time it is stable and so on. Okay, testable, yeah, both needs to be testable. Very important, guys. If you just understand this bullet number 3, of course, in connection with everything else that we are discussing, you can see, or you can yourself become an expert. Start looking at all the different claims for the dating of Mahabharata, dating of Ramayana, and quickly you will see how many of them are simply not testable. Therefore, they are not scientific, and therefore they are not empirical, or rather they are not empirical, therefore they are not scientific. But these people are just claiming that, oh yeah, they are scientific. Testability is the criteria. Falsifiable, yes, both of them are falsifiable. We discussed that. It may sound like hypothesis is just a guess and theory is established and evidence based and been verified. Just keep that in mind. It is the best game in town. Okay, and new evidence, new developments in science and technology may allow us to test something that was not tested before. I'm going to show you an example of that, namely my favorite, and I hope it's your favorite, the Arundhati Vasishtha observation, which was not tested until I tested it, in 2009. Now, I was testing it for 15 years. It took me 15 years to finally test it scientifically, empirically, meaningfully, and then logically derive the inference conclusion. Is well substantiated in case of hypothesis? No. In case of theory, yes, because it has gone through multiple sets of data and still it holds true. Okay, yeah, that's what it is. Is well tested? The hypothesis is no. I will say when we start, it's not tested. But if we are successful with that hypothesis, then it is a well tested, that particular thing. Okay, but remember, the hypothesis is well tested only for that particular set of data, a limited data. That is not the case with the theory, and that's the difference. Okay, data usually based on a very limited data. Yeah, it's already, I just said that. And in case of theory, based on a very wide set of data under various circumstances. Okay, and we are not going to discuss that today, but eventually we will. Hypothesis and a theory. Instance, specific. Hypothesis is usually based on a very specific observation and is limited to that instance. We will see a wonderful example of that. On the other hand, theory is general. That is, therefore we say a statement of a theory must be generic, must be universal. Okay, a theory is the establishment of a general principle, a rule, a law. Some of the words you may use carefully, okay, interchangeably, through multiple tests and experiments, and this principle may apply to various specific instances. Once you build a theory, that's your deductive statement, and against that you are going to look at all the evidence, okay, that is demanded by that theory to be tested. You cannot escape that. The last one, the purpose. Purpose behind the hypothesis is to present an uncertain possibility that can be explored further through experiments and observations. And we are getting to that point right now to just show you a demonstration of how a hypothesis looks like. And in case of a theory, to explain why a large set of observations are consistently made, or why a large set of observations can be beautifully explained by the theory. We are not going to do that today. We are going to focus on the hypothesis. So let's get back to my favorite observation. Now, because I call it my favorite observation, there are many people with much low intellect, and they say, look, Nilesh, all he has done is this Arundhati Vasishta, and based on that he says this is so and so is the year of Mahabharata war. How stupid and how nonsensical. This just allowed me to test a one piece of evidence out of 300, to test my explanation, to test my educated guess. Okay, it proved worthy, and then I turned that into a theory. So after this I will tell you my hypothesis, how I started, but what is my theory. Okay, so the big star that you see here is the star Vasishta. The small star that you see at the top is star Arundhati. Now, if we don't give any background, then we have no idea what are we talking, where are they, and so on. So we are just going to give them a reference frame of the directions. Imagine you looking at the sky at these two stars, and now against that you have an indication for the direction. So what we will able to say is the two simple statements. Let's say that the Arundhati, the small star, is north of Vasishta, the big star. The other statement we will able to make is that the big star Vasishta is to the west of Arundhati. Now let me see if I made those statements correct. Okay, yeah, I have made it correct. So Arundhati is to the north and to the east of Vasishta. Keep that in mind. Now, what is the significance? This is the condition today, by the way. And what is the significance of it? Well, significance is, since Earth rotates from the west to the east. Now this is a background knowledge, guys. If somebody has a confusion and somebody even disagrees with this, stop here. This is not for you. This video is not for you. Let me repeat, this video is not for you. There is a certain amount of knowledge, whether it is about astronomy, whether it is about a language, whether it is about science, whether it is about logic, whether it is about empiricism, tantra yukti, objective testing, that we have to take it for granted. Earth rotating from the west to east is one such thing. So now imagine it is coming from west to the east. That is how it is rotating. So when these stars come up, Arundhati and Vasishta, because Vasishta is to the west of Arundhati, we are going to see it first, so to say. And as you continue to watch them, as they go in an anti-clockwise fashion, if you are facing the north direction at the pole star, and they will go in the anti-clockwise direction around it from northeast to northwest, and then they will finally set down, okay, set against the horizon. So what you will see throughout their visible thing that Vasishta is ahead of Arundhati, Vasishta is walking ahead of Arundhati, and that's what that says. Vasishta appears to walk ahead of Arundhati. Okay, now compare this definition. A suggested hypothesis, a suggested explanation for an observable phenomenon or for some evidence. Now, this was not observable phenomenon is Vasishta is walking ahead. But the Mahabharata text said exactly opposite. He said at the time of Mahabharata war, it was the Arundhati that was walking ahead of Vasishta, okay, and not Vasishta walking ahead of Arundhati. Okay, so something that we say, oh my God, now how do we make that happen, or why that would have happened? In fact, this was such a puzzling statement that many people absolutely did not know what to say. Like one of the great or the greatest astronomer in my opinion, Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit, greatest astronomer not just in India but around the world, that possibly last 400 years had seen, at least as far as the observable astronomy goes, but also with the mathematical calculations. He said, I don't know what to make of this. Lokmanya Tilak made use of this observation in a slightly different fashion. In the said, look, some of our Vedic texts like Rigveda is pure, but there is all kinds of adulteration, and he was wrong on that, by the way. Yes, there is adulteration everywhere. We call that interpolations or different kinds of errors. But he used this as an example to say, look, I mean, all kinds of crazy statements are there in Mahabharata, such as Arundhati walking ahead of Vasishtha. Now, is that possible? Come on, give me a break. And by the way, he was a great mathematician and a great astronomer. But great individuals can be wrong. Okay? Then if you fast forward, C.V. Vaidya, he was given the title Bharatacharya by Lokmanya Tilak. Why? Because of his great and deep work on Mahabharata. And he said, this is not possible, so maybe some later individual after Vyasa, like someone like a Romaharshana Sauti, he might have introduced as an embellishment, something very fascinating, impossible sounding kind of observation. So that's what he thought. Fast forward to say 1960s, and Bharat Ratna Panduranga Vaman Kane, P.V. Kane, he said, this is astronomy speak, this is impossible in the very order of nature, this just cannot happen. Why? Because these two stars, along with the additional 6 stars of the Saptarshi, are extremely stable stars with a very low proper motions. Again, proper motion is something I want you to understand as a part of background knowledge, astronomy speak, agama. If you know it, great. If you don't know, all you have to do, if you're curious enough, if you're not, well, all bets are off. If you're curious enough, just go to internet, type proper motion of stars and so on, and you'll know what it is. It's not complicated. But it was known that these are extremely stable stars with very low proper motions. So things cannot change that fast in the recent past, to change this. So he said this is impossible. Dr. P.V. Vartak, Brahmarshi Dr. P.V. Vartak, okay, he is another one he should have received, or I hope he receives in future. I don't have a great hopes because of the structure that I understand. But in my mind, he is a Bharat Ratna. Okay, just like I say, Rajiv Malhotraji is Bharat Ratna in my mind. Now people say, what? And okay, they can say what they want. I say what I consider correct. Definitely Dr. P.V. Vartak, who passed away, about 7+ years ago, definitely deserves a Bharat Ratna. Now, he tried to test this Arundhati Vasishtha observation in 3 different ways. He failed at it, and then in a scientific spirit, that's what scientific acumen is. He wrote in his book, see, that's what I came across when I came across Arundhati Vasishtha, and then I asked one mathematics professor if he has heard this thing before, and he made me aware of the work of Dr. P.V. Vartak in the early 90s. And he said, yeah, I think I remember somebody writing about it, and that was Dr. P.V. Vartak. Dr. P.V. Vartak had tried to test it in 3 different ways, and he failed 3 times, and then he wrote it in his book 2 or 3 times, saying that he is requesting the future astronomers, future Mahabharata dating researchers, Mahabharata researchers to study this Arundhati Vasishtha phenomenon further, the Vyasa's observation further, okay, and see if they can come up with an explanation and thus assist in the accurate and precise dating of the Mahabharata war. It was a lucky coincidence that I happened to run into it. Then I became aware of P.V. Vartak's work, and rest is the story that you already know. Okay, so now imagine we have to figure this out. So how do we start thinking? I'm just giving you some intuition, into how somebody goes about thinking about it. So right now, Vasishtha is to the west of Arundhati, and Earth is rotating from the west to east. So as they come up in the northeast, Vasishtha is going to be ahead, Arundhati is going to be behind, and that just continues until they set on the northwest horizon. Okay, so just that is the current situation. That's what we understand: who is ahead, who is behind, who is walking ahead of who. So now using that same consistency, because we cannot think of any other motion right now. I mean, there is none. If you think of something, guys, write it down in the comments. If it is something sensible and I have not thought about it before, I will comment. If I have thought about it before, I will ignore it. Okay. So one possibility in our thought experiments is to ask the question, and remember, we are talking of the past. Okay. Was there a time, could there be a time in the past, could there be a possibility that it so happens because of we don't know what, maybe proper motion, maybe something else, we don't, could it be that, but let's take for example, because I said proper motion, let's say, could it be that because of a proper motion, if we go back in the past, is it possible that this Arundhati moves or had moved in this direction and Vasishtha had moved in this direction, which is easterly direction, so that Arundhati was to the west of Vasishtha? If we could get a situation like that in the past due to proper motion, guess what? That's when we would have a situation similar to described by Vyasadeva in the Mahabharata. Ya chaisha visuta rajas trailokye sadhu sammata arundhati tayapesha vasishta prushtata kruta. Arundhati has placed Vasishtha on her back, she is walking ahead, and so on. So I went on finding this out. So first I have to find out the data. I need a proper motion data, I need proper motion data, reliability for a long time. So whatever I had, actually I did it. I'm not going to discuss what it was. You have to read my book, When Did the Mahabharata War Happen, if you are interested in the details. But the answer was unacceptable. Okay, just the broad answer I'll tell you is that such a thing doesn't exist due to proper motion. In fact, 200,000 years from today, yes, there would be a situation when Arundhati is to the west of Vasishtha. What do we do with that? Vyasa is saying that something happened in the past at the time of Mahabharata war. So this is not the route. I'm just giving you an idea how a thought experiment works. The second possibility, now this was not a strong possibility, but you know what? Beggars cannot be choosy. And one more thing, you should not discount any possibilities. Just explore them anyways. You're going to learn a lot, even if it doesn't solve the problem you are trying to solve. So what is the other thing? I didn't have anything. So east-west, guess what? It's only going to happen in future, 200,000 years from today. What do I have to lose? I said, what if I consider the north-south direction? Is it possible that I can use the proper motion or anything else that if I have a data available for, and see when this Arundhati and Vasishtha would be next to each other in the north-south direction? See, right now Arundhati is to the north and Vasishtha is to the south of each other. Okay, there. What if I can figure out a time in the past when they are exactly next to each other? Okay, now I'm not going to give you even the details of that answer. Actually, I explored that possibility, I came up with the answer, and there were good reasons why I have to discount that. You have to read my book, When Did the Mahabharata War Happen? Okay, or the Mahabharat Kala Nirnay, Mahabharatacha Kal in Marathi, or it's also been translated in Kannada, and now it's getting translated in many languages. Okay, so you can read that. So these two possibilities were gone, and then I had to think of, I felt helpless, guys. Okay, so then that's why it took 15 years. Okay, so I tried different one, but just not that. There are many other issues. I worked with some very primitive type of software, okay, very primitive type of calculations I went through, like a DOS-based software. And because they did not have a proper resolution, even though actually if they had a proper resolution, I would have found the answer lot earlier than 2009. But we just don't know how a course of action will take place. Okay, so I had to wait until 2009 when finally I figured it out. Okay, but today's issue is not so much about Arundhati Vasishtha, but I still wanted to show you how this goes through. So now I had to think of possibilities beyond a proper motion. Okay, And just because you think of a possibility, again, you know what, you're going back to the hypothesis. So purely Arundhati going ahead of Vasishta due to proper motion in the east-west direction, that's an educated guess. The answer came out, nah. How about the second educated guess, hypothesis? What about they going past each other in the north-south direction? And I'll not tell you the answer, you can read my book, but the bigger answer was, nah, that's not going to be useful. Okay, so what do I do? So proper motion by itself is not an answer. It may be still influencing something because the things were changing, as we found for east-west direction 200,000 years from today, and something similar, not that much time gap, in the north-south direction. So then I started looking at the obliquity of the Earth's axis and the precession of the Earth's axis, and finally I found the answer, and you know it. And if you don't know it, you know what to do. Read my blogs, read my books, watch my videos, okay? But let's get back to the journey. So finally in 2009, I did figure out the phenomenon why Arundhati would appear to walk ahead of Vasishta, and rest is history. Okay. Now, so what is my hypothesis, or rather what was my hypothesis in say 1994 or sometime between 1994 and 2009? That it must be a visual observation. This high level hypothesis did not change. It must be a visual observation. Now I'm emphasizing that, guys, because there are many other Indic researchers who have made all kinds of crazy hypotheses. For example, one individual said, hey, you know what, this is not something to be looked at as an astronomy observation. This is not something to be tested. None of this. It is all in the mind of Vyasa. Another Indic researcher said it is possibly something that Vyasa saw in a dream. Okay, now what's problem with both of these hypotheses? Not that they are crazy, well, because by definition, if you're trying to solve a problem that is not been solved by others, whatever hypothesis one proposes will always be bizarre and crazy. So let's not blame them for that. Let's clap them. Okay, clap for those crazy hypotheses. The problem with both of them, one saying it is just only in the mind of a Vyasa, and another person, or I forgot whether the same individual, saying, oh, maybe just Vyasa saw that in a dream. The problem is in both cases they are not empirical. How do we objectively test them? What is in the mind of Vyasa, or what Vyasa might have seen in a dream? There is no way to do that. And that's for that reason they are not a true scientific hypothesis. Because remember, if you go back, what is the one of the condition? Look at bullet number 3 or the row number 3. They must be testable. Okay, and that was not the case with these different hypotheses. And so my hypothesis, it must be a visual observation. And finally I could show that. And then the theory, this is not based on, this is inspired by Arundhati Vasishta observation, but it's not a guarantee that my theory would be coming out true purely based on Arundhati Vasishta. It was true for Arundhati Vasishta, but now I had to go through 300 plus different astronomy descriptions to test if my theory was correct, which was built based on this Arundhati Vasishta hypothesis, that it must be a visual observation. See how I turned the hypothesis into a theory. Okay. So my theory there, I said astronomy descriptions of Mahabharata texts such as AV, but remember there are 300 plus additional ones, are visual descriptions, visual observations of a Mahabharata times. So I hope you see the difference between that. Okay, that's it, guys. And if you want to know what this hypothesis was, how I verified it, how I tested it, how I turned that into a theory, and then went on to test additional 300 plus evidence in case of Mahabharata, 600 plus different pieces of evidence, astronomy evidence in case of Ramayana, and when I said 300, actually when I did this in 2009, 2011, it was about 200, okay, when I wrote when did the Mahabharata war happen. After that, when I started looking for some additional aspects, I came across additional 100 plus. So I have used that evidence in the Bhishma Nirvana, and that together they are now 300 plus. Okay, that's the story. So these are the books. If you are in India, the best place to order is from Subbu Publications. They will deliver it to your home, or a specific India address. Not for outside. They can do it for outside. Just be aware the shipping costs are significant. Okay, so don't be shocked. If you are outside, I think the most efficient and maybe a cost effective source, I'm not so sure, but you can check that, is basically Amazon. If you can buy from Amazon in the country and a place you live, you should able to get these 3 books of mine from that place. Okay, since then I have also published a 4th book, Bharatiya Prachin Khagol Vigyan. It is in Marathi. It is being translated in English, but for now only in Marathi, and you can get it from various bookstores, but also through Amazon and through this QR code. I think it works. Okay, again it will take you to Amazon. What else? Okay, and then my books, as I said, have been translated in other languages. This one, just one example or illustration of Aityasik Ram. This is a translation of 12,209 BCE, or also the historic Ram. They are essentially the same books, and Aityasik Ram is exactly the same, only translated in Marathi. You can scan this code, or go to again Amazon or Book Ganga, or go to Param Mitra publication site, and you can order those. That's it, guys. Do write your comments. Okay, sensible comments, I would say, and I will see you shortly in another episode with another subject. Namaskar. Thank you.